we're seeing might be going. So very quickly about Stripe. We're building the best way to take payment online. So we're a technology platform. You simply integrate our APIs into your site and start processing live transactions. And we take care of all the relationship with the banks, all the security, and just transfer the funds into your bank account. We work with a growing range of high-growth technology companies, people in the UK here like Garden News and Media, Virgin Group, startups through to blue chips, startups we just gone live with recently, really exciting companies like Deliveroo, Packed Coffee. So thinking about payment, 2%. This really interesting number. Estimates are that only 2% of global consumer spending currently happens online. So when we're thinking about the future of online payment, first of all, the obvious thing is it's getting larger. And we can debate about whether we think this will get to 20, 30, 40%. But there's definitely a wave happening here. Now, there's two different parts to that, I think. One is the transfer of existing commerce to online. And that's kind of interesting, and sort of how we can support existing business happening in better, easier ways. But the other thing we're really interested in Stripe is about how to enable new businesses, new types of transactions between buyers and sellers who previously wouldn't have had the ability to transact. A lot of that is about when you're thinking about selling globally to people based around the world and want to pay in their payment method of choice. And there are hundreds of different payment methods out there globally, and it becomes impractical for businesses to think about integrating all of them individually. So how can we do about that? The thing we think about a lot is about how can we increase the GDP of the internet by doing these things. So a few topics I thought I'd touch on really quickly. One is mobile as the future location for e-commerce. Now, a big part of this is, of course, Apple Pay. That was announced recently. We were actually really excited and pleased. We're one of the 6 companies that were launch partners on the merchant side with Apple Pay. So of the applications that were featured by Apple when they launched, Stripe actually was working with 50% of them that we're really excited about. But thinking about Apple Pay, and I think a lot of people have seen where Apple Pay is, thinking about where it's going in the future, to me, it makes sense to take a step back and look about where it's come from. And Apple are a company that typically looks smart when they release something new, but actually in hindsight often look even smarter. So going back a year ago, so they launched Apple Pay only just recently, but going back a year ago, with the iPhone 5S was the first phone to feature the Touch ID, so the thumbprint reader on the phone. And there's an interesting trend here where they released it initially and it was an easier way to unlock your phone without entering a passcode. At the time, that was the only function you could really use it for. It wasn't available to third-party apps. Fast forward a year later, and it becomes an integral part of the Apple Pay experience. What's also interesting is at the same time, Apple opened up the APIs within the phone to allow third-party app developers to build apps that interact with the Touch ID sensor to use them with their own apps. So thinking similarly about the NFC chip that's been added to the iPhone 6 to enable the Apple Pay for point of sale, it's interesting to think about the future, and again, similarly right now, that can only be used for Apple Pay. What will it look like in, who knows, whether it's a year or when in the future, when Apple open that up to allow third-party applications to use the NFC chip in the phone? What possibilities will be created sort of, and I have no idea of their plans, but thinking 12 months from now, potentially, if it were to follow the same, same trajectory as the Touch ID sensor. So thinking more about Apple Pay, it comes back to commerce on mobile. And a big part here is a lot of the key things that affect when you're doing transactions on mobile are the same considerations that we always had to think about on desktop in terms of optimizing the user experience, making it really easy for people to pay. In many ways, though, with mobile, those constraints just get all the more brutal because of the smaller device, smaller screen. We're trying to type into our device with our little fingers. So a key thing is make it super simple. I'll touch on this super briefly. One of the great things about Apple Pay is the ability. So it's not just the payment, but if you select. So this is Instacart, who's one of the companies we work with. They're an application for ordering your groceries online. you can fill out your basket through the app and then select to check out or pay with Apple Pay. And if you select with Apple Pay, not only do you make that payment really easily, but Apple Pay also have your shipping and delivery address information stored on file, so you don't have to re-enter that as well. And this has proven to be a big success. So Whole Foods were reporting that they've had a big success with a combination of Instacart combined with Apple Pay. One of the interesting things was that they said they've seen the average basket size, the average order placed through Instacart is 2.5 times bigger than the order with people in store because of the increased convenience. Another example, I don't know if you've heard about Cards Against Humanity. If you have, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, then suffice to say their tagline is a party game for horrible people. They're a really interesting company. The product is a card game. So traditionally, you go to market through distributors, online, that's marketplace such as Amazon, etc. Cards Against Humanity have built a super successful consumer brand such that they were able to step away from the clutches of Amazon and the online marketplaces and actually create their own site where they could sell directly to customers. Such was the power of their brand. And I picked them out not just because they're a cool company, but because they really epitomize for me the simplicity which we need to reach when selling to people online. So here's the part where you give us £20. Simply 3 things: credit card number, expiry date, and CVC. They don't need your billing address. It's not 1998. I think when I see so many people who are requesting card type, cardholder name, different factors that we do sort of by going through the motions, not thinking about what are we actually trying to do here, trying to optimize our shopping experience. I thought social commerce, it was an interesting time to talk about this. We could say it's a bit of a tipping point for social commerce. People may have seen this summer, both Twitter and Facebook have announced that they're experimenting with commerce within their own platforms. And we're fortunate to be working with both of them to power these steps. So what's really exciting about this, so as an example within Twitter, embedding the buy button directly within the stream, whereas previously promotion might happen through social media, which makes sense. In today's internet, this is where consumers are spending the majority of their time. And yet the purchase step was 5, 6, 7 steps away from the actual discovery point. Whereas if you can embed a buy button within the tweet, within the post, so every time it's retweeted, it's shared, you're able to purchase there and then. It's interesting to think about what this means, and as these programs expand, what difference does it make for retailers, for companies? Does it reduce the significance of our own destination sites? Does it increase the significance? Does it increase the accountability of social media? If it's now less around just promotion and awareness, and the funnel is drastically released so you can track your success of social media campaigns right through to dollars or pounds or euros spent. Another interesting trend to touch on really quickly, we see about the intersection between online and physical commerce. So things like replacing cash cards at the point of sale. A really cool company we've been working with is YoYo, based in London, where they provide an app to make it really easy to pay in store, so you can scan your phone at checkout. One thing I wanted to touch on there is a trend we see here is that making payment a little bit easier at the point of sale, it certainly seems like a useful thing. But the interesting trend that we see is using payment purely as the utility rather than just for the payment's sake. So actually the value, or you might think the value in these sorts of businesses is not the payment itself and making that easier, but how to use payment as a way to collect data about your customers, to build a closer relationship, to build loyalty. Similarly, Lyft, ride-sharing application, so you can get a ride. A lot of people used to think that the future of payment was moving towards mobile, so we'd be paying with our phones. If you've used Lyft, they're based in the US, or Halo, or Uber you might have used in London, I think the interesting thing to think about there is that actually when it comes to the end of the ride and we get out and thank the driver and go on our way, we're not actually taking our phones out of our pocket, and the payment is happening automatically on mobile. So the interesting thing about there is how can we really go beyond in terms of making payment super frictionless or even invisible to the customer. And finally, I thought I'd end on this idea about payment as the full stack, which is something we think about a lot at Stripe. So taking money, taking funds from our customer is one thing. But there's a lot else that's associated with a purchase, whether that's dealing with frauds, dealing with reporting. One thing I'm really excited is that earlier last week, Shopify, who you may be familiar with, they provide the service to build your online web store. So you can upload your products and they help you run the whole thing. So they started out with this vision of being everything that you need to run your online store. And last year, for the first time, they launched the final piece of the puzzle, which was Shopify Payments, whereas previously you had to bring in your own payment provider for the very last step. So that was the first time, Tobias, the founder of Shopify, was tweeting that for the first time they'd sort of reached a point on their vision where Shopify was everything you needed. And as it happened, we partnered with them to power Shopify Payments behind the scenes. And this week they brought this to the UK, which is incredibly exciting. And the trend here is thinking about companies that traditionally wouldn't have been payments companies. But if you're doing commerce, particularly if you're working on a platform, this is something that we're working with a lot of companies on in terms of allowing them to facilitate payments so that we can help make it really easy for them to get the relationship with the banks, etc. Whereas previously it would have been such a distraction for their business that they would have had to completely stand at arm's length from that. So sort of final thoughts there about what making new business models possible, making new experiences possible, by providing payment as part of the full service of whatever, whether it's online shopping or retail or software as a service or whatever it may be. I'll leave it there. Thanks, and if anyone would like to chat later, I'd be glad.